where we built, it was just like a team exercise, we built a parachute, and that you had to bring down an actual to the ground safely. Otherwise, half of the team is remote, so you will see around about 5 of us here in the office today, and everybody from the team will help you in the interactive part if you want that. And the other half is working remotely. Mostly our engineers are spread throughout Europe. The more formal introduction to the company is we are a tokenization software and technology provider. What tokenization software is, we will experience in the workshop today because you will actually get to use our product. We work on the one hand with enterprises, but also with small and medium-sized companies. Enterprises that we work with and that are our clients are mostly banks that use our product in order to digitize these securities, financial securities like bonds, stocks, fund shares, commodities. And they use our software in order to create tokens that are a digital representation of the asset. And for them, this can save a lot of costs, and it makes the whole process of what's called securities settlement much more efficient. We're not diving too much into that today because the workshop should rather show, how to actually use tokenization, and these are topics that banks care about. If you want to talk about that, we can do that after the workshop. So let's talk about tokenization. What is it? Why is it exciting? First of all, tokens are a paperless proof of ownership. So nowadays, you typically would have a piece of paper that proves that you're the owner of a car, for example, or when you own a house, you are entered in the land registry. So for most valuable assets, you have some kind of a paper certificate. Or if you own a gemstone or an expensive watch, then you will have some kind of a paper certificate that proves that you're the true owner. So you have not just the physical asset, but you also have a legal document that represents that asset. And so the paper certificate can be represented in form of a digital token instead of that piece of paper. And that comes with a lot of advantages across different asset classes. One of the advantages is instant global transfer. So let's stick to the example of a car. The car comes with papers, and if you want to sell the car, you don't just transfer the key to the car, but you will also transfer this piece of paper that represents that you are the owner of the car. And so you have to physically move that piece of paper to the new owner. If the ownership is represented by a digital token, then you can transfer the ownership with a click of a button, and the ownership is transferred instantaneously, and you don't need the paper anymore, which is one of the advantages. So, and of course, you don't care whether the new owner is in the same room with you or whether they sit at the other end of the world. You can essentially do that as fast as you would send an email. So we like to make the analogy of that tokenization is to the transfer of asset ownership, the same as when email was introduced and we got rid of paper-based mail to a large degree. And then there's a lot of other exciting stuff going on. We won't dive too much into that because this is an expert topic that people who deal with tokenization every day are excited about. But to mention it briefly, payment automation is a very big topic. Why? Because when you transfer ownership in an asset, then typically it's connected to a payment. So on the one hand, you have the transfer of the asset, and on the other hand, you have the transfer of the payment. And in the old world, these two processes are disconnected. So when I want to sell my car, I transfer the papers, and the new owner will send me the money. Now, if I transfer the papers, I have a risk. The specific term is called counterparty risk. The counterparty risk exists because I transfer the ownership, but I need to get the payment. As long as I don't have the payment, it could happen that my counterparty goes bankrupt. I gave away the car, but I never received the payment. And so in the financial world, this is called counterparty risk. And tokenization allows you to eliminate that counterparty risk. How that is done, we don't dive into that now. But there are very good technical solutions to do that. and tokenization is at the core of it. What's more interesting are the use cases of tokenization, and these are 6 categories how we like to categorize them. You could even open up more, but I would say these are the most common ones. And some of those you may already have heard of or may potentially even have interacted with already. The first one to mention are stablecoins, for example. Stablecoins are digital representations of US dollars, of euros, or any other currencies. When I want to transfer money to someone else, I would typically do that through a bank transfer. Of course, when we look at Europe and the SEPA region, then the bank transfers work very well. We even have instant SEPA now, so I can transfer money to someone else instantly from my bank account. So that works fine. But when we look at cross-border transactions, then things can get more expensive and more lengthy. If I want to do a bank transfer to the US, it can easily cost 40, 50 euros, and it will take at least 1 day, typically even 2 or 3 days to complete. And that's one of the reasons why stablecoins were introduced. Stablecoins are just tokenized forms of money, and you can send them instantaneously from one wallet to another. There's plenty of other use cases, platform tokens, also called utility tokens. These are often platform-specific currencies. You may have heard of Binance, which is one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges. What they have done is they introduced the BNB coin, and when you trade on the Binance exchange, then you can pay the fees for the trading in the BNB coin, which means that there is a demand for the coin, and there's the price is going up as the demand for it goes up. So there's an actual underlying use case behind it. There are security tokens, which typically represent financial securities like bonds, stocks, fund shares, commodities, structured products, etc. And this is, together with stablecoins, probably one of the biggest use cases right now if you think of the dollar or euro value behind these tokens. And here, these tokens are actually the genuine representation of ownership. So you typically would not have both a paper certificate and a token, but the idea is actually to replace the paper certificate with the token. And this is why financial institutions are interested in this topic. There's a few others, I won't go through all of them. Maybe one more that's worth mentioning are so-called non-fungible tokens, also called NFTs, a term that you may have heard. NFTs have become very popular in the context of digital art. Typically, when you have a JPEG image, then you can copy that indefinitely, which means that JPEGs typically are not a very good source of a store of value. But when you turn them into a token, then they become or can become unique if you want them. And so back in 2019, people started to create NFTs, and they started to become. Have heard of some of the more popular collections, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club collection, that have had very high prices, some of them even in the millions, and that's how NFTs became popular. But as we will see, NFT on the technical level is just a token standard, and you can do a lot of things with them. It's not just digital art. You could also use them as entry tickets, for example. So TOA, in theory, when they send you a QR code so that you get into the conference, they could do that as an NFT, and some providers, some event organizers, for example, have started to use NFTs on a technical level as entry tickets. So these are some of the tokenization use cases, and some of these press statements. Level of markets is tokenized, so this is more about the security tokens. You may have heard of large NFT drops by big consumer brands like Nike. What they started to do is that they actually there were specific collections where you bought, a pair of shoes, and you also got an NFT along with that. And sometimes you have collectors that collect certain types of sneakers, and as the value appreciates, you can represent the ownership. Token is represented by something that's called a smart contract. And with fungible tokens, where the token standard is called ERC20, it's pretty clear because when you create a new token, it's a new smart contract and you count the smart contracts. But of course, it doesn't matter whether you have 5 million of that token or just one. It counts as one token under this view. With NFTs, it's slightly more complicated because sometimes people create one smart contract, and under that contract, they create a lot of NFTs, like the Bored Apes, for example, that you may know. There's the collection is really big. I don't know. There's probably hundreds, if not even thousands. 10,000. So there's 10,000 Bored Apes. All of them are done under one smart contract. So the Bored Apes, even though there's 10,000 different apes, are represented just as one token in this statistics because it's just one smart contract that is representing them. So if you counted the actual number of NFTs, for example, that existed, the number would be much, much bigger. So this is a rather conservative estimate. Also, if we dive into the details for Ethereum, we can only count so-called blue checkmark tokens. We don't need to dive too deep into that, but it's probably only 10% of the actual tokens that exist on the Ethereum chain because the way you can do the counting. So anyway, the actual number is much, much bigger, but that's not even so relevant. What's even more relevant is roughly the growth. And so if it's consistently not accurate, but the growth numbers are accurate, then this is what's interesting about this metric as well. Now let's look at a few use case examples, and then we can already start to dive into actually creating your own token, because obviously the goal for today is that you will walk out with a self-created token out of here. VP Bank is a private bank based in Liechtenstein in Switzerland. What do? They tokenize collectibles. This is an expensive watch, for example. They also tokenize art and a few other types of assets. Why do they do that? Because they allow you to own fractional ownership in this asset. So let's assume this is a super expensive watch that costs, I don't know, €500,000. It would be too expensive for one investor. Maybe not because they cannot afford it, but maybe because of fractional. So fractionalization is also one of the, let's say, benefits and goals of tokenization. Another example is tokenization of carbon credits. Rubicon Carbon is a subsidiary of TPG, one of the largest private equity funds in the world, and they have started to buy up relatively large amounts of carbon credits in order to turn this into an investable asset class, which I think is a good thing because when there's more trading and more demand for carbon credits, then potentially more people will issue it and do countermeasures to CO2 emissions. And so Rubicon Carbon is making carbon credits an investable asset class. And one of the things that they do is they tokenize the ownership in order to make the secondary trading of carbon credits easier. Yet one other example is the tokenization of art. An Australian company called Canvas has started to tokenize art and other types of assets with a very similar goal like the example that I just showed with the Swiss bank in order to allow for fractional ownership in art. And the last example that I wanted to give is an entirely different category. You may be familiar with the brand LimeWire, which in the 90s used to be a relatively popular consumer brand, you could say, that has then become inactive. And there's a founder team that has acquired the brand, and they are now starting an NFT marketplace. And what they have done is, in order to finance the operations and the setup of that marketplace, they have done something that's called an ICO, an initial coin offering, which is a little bit similar to an IPO, an initial public offering of a stock corporation. But the tokens that people are buying here are not stocks in that company, but they are actually a bit similar to the BNB, to the Binance token that I mentioned earlier. The LimeWire token, among other things, will be a payment token on the new LimeWire marketplace. And so what they have done is, they have done the token sale. In order to do the token sale, they need to create a token. And so that's what LimeWire have done. So it's a bit similar to a financial security, but it's not a financial security because it's a so-called utility token. We would need to dive into the legal differences, but also we don't want to do that because we want to have enough time to create our own token together. So when you create tokens, when you manage tokens, there's a few pain points. First of all, when you create a token, you need to write a piece of software that's typically called a smart contract. Smart contract really is just a fancy word to describe a piece of code. Smart contracts were invented in the context of Ethereum. Ethereum is the most popular blockchain to create tokens. And if you want to do that, you have to write the smart contract, and you have to do that with a programming language called Solidity. Solidity is a programming language that was invented in connection with Ethereum, and well, it has a few things in common with JavaScript, for example. But anyway, it is its own programming language, and so when you want to create a token, you need to write that smart contract. Now, typically what has happened in the past is that someone would go to a software house, tell them, I want to create this token, please write the smart contract for me, which is relatively expensive because then you have to pay software engineers by the hour, and you have to do that from scratch every time you want a new token. And that's also not really scalable, and then typically you want to have a user interface where you can manage the token, because as we will see later in the workshop today, after you have created the token, there's other things that you want to do with it, and for that ideally you have a convenient user interface, which you don't have if you ask a developer to create a smart contract for you. And then there's also security aspects. When you create a token, the smart contract has a so-called private key. That's basically the way how to manipulate a token. When you create a token and it has a supply of, let's say, 1 million tokens, then sometimes you may want to increase or decrease the supply of tokens. In order to do that, you need to have the private key to the smart contract. And ideally, you store that in a highly secure way through a wallet. But if you give that away to a third-party developer, then there are also security issues connected with that. And so these are the things that are challenges in the context of tokenization. And that's what we are solving at Bitbond, and you will use our product, and hopefully you will agree that we are solving some of these issues. So to really sum it up, it's writing your own smart contracts is something that you don't want to do. You don't want to pay high fees, and you don't want to have a complicated solution. And that's what we are trying to solve with what we call Token Tool. Token Tool is our tokenization product, and it allows you to create a token in a very simple way without having to write your own smart contract. We have already prepared a smart contract, and you can configure them in this user interface, but you don't need to go into the coding. Sometimes we also like to compare this to like graphics software. When you use something like Photoshop or Canva, you also don't need to have programming knowledge in order to edit a picture, for example. It would be outrageous today to think about having to be an engineer in order to edit a picture. This has become so common to do that. And so that's how you can see that tokenization is still in a very early stage, because actually a lot of people would still go and write smart contracts from scratch when they want to create a token. One last thing, and then we will go into the actual token creation part. I have mentioned ERC20, ERC721. So the market has established certain standards how these tokens are designed. And that's a very good thing, because you typically safekeep tokens in so-called wallets. Now, there are plenty of ways to create a token, but if you don't follow a certain standard, then the wallet where you actually hold the tokens will not be able to display it. We could compare that to euro notes, for example. The euro notes are standardized into like a 5, a 10 euro note, 20, etc. It's standardized, and they all have a certain size. They fit into our physical wallets that we carry in our pockets. If all of a sudden, the central bank was issuing money that is not standardized and doesn't fit into our wallets, then probably, everybody would complain. And so that you can transfer value in digital form from one wallet to another in a very easy way, there are certain token standards that have been established. The two by far most common ones are ERC20 for so-called fungible tokens, and ERC-721 for so-called non-fungible tokens. Then there's plenty of different blockchains on top of which you can tokenize. When you think back to the slide where I showed how many tokens exist, the vast majority of tokens are on Ethereum, Polygon, and the Binance Smart Chain. So these are the most popular blockchains for tokenization. Our product supports them all, so whenever you create a new token, you can select which chain you actually want to use. And then there are different wallets. As I mentioned, you would typically safekeep tokens in a wallet. And there are consumer wallets like Metamask, which is what we're going to use today. But there are also bank-grade wallet solutions like Fireblocks, Metacore, Ledger Enterprise. These are not consumer wallets. This is not something that you would use when you just want to hold a few tokens. This is something that banks typically use when they provide custody services to their customers. So that's the theoretical part. Any questions so far? If not, then the interactive part begins now. So what is our goal? Our goal is that everybody who joined us here today will create their own token. That was also the title of the satellite event, so I hope nobody is surprised that we're doing this. Of course, you're not obliged to this, nobody has to do it, but I think you know, when you have a first-hand experience of actually creating a token, it's a lot more fun, and the topic becomes much more tangible. It's a little bit like talking about email without ever having sent an email yourself. So imagine it a little bit like that. So that's why we want everybody to go through the process of creating your own token. And we have prepared slides for each step that is necessary, but there's 5 people with Bitbond shirts here today, so we will go through it step by step, but if you have questions, then each of us will be more than happy to help you. Is everybody ready? Then you can do that on your phone or you can do that on your computer. It's perfectly up to you, both is fine. And we get started with actually creating or installing a wallet. Without a wallet, there is no way for you to create a token. So this is a necessary step. There's plenty of wallets out there. One of the most popular consumer wallets is Metamask. Does someone of you already have Metamask installed on their phone? 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. So you guys can skip this step. Just open your Metamask app unless you have already done it. Everybody else, please go to metamask.io. It doesn't matter whether you have an Android phone or an iPhone. The app exists for both, and just install it on your phone. So I'll give you a few minutes now to do that. So those of you who still need time, please take it. For those who are already finished, I'll continue talking a little bit, but don't worry, you won't miss too much. We will be using one particular blockchain for creating a token in this session. Now, on Token2, we support the 7 most popular chains that are so-called Ethereum compatible chains. They are Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, Binance Smart Chain, Phantom, plus Optimism and Arbitrum, which are so-called layer 2 solutions. What that is, we don't need to dive into right now. Typically, when you want to tokenize assets, you will select a particular blockchain, and you will do that based on certain criteria. And we have listed them here. I know this slide might be too small to read, but it doesn't matter. We don't need to go through these right now. Just to let you know, one of the criteria, for example, is the transaction throughput on the chain. Because blockchains nowadays are not super scalable. To make one comparison, the Ethereum chain can process around about 23 transactions per second globally. That's for everybody, right? And to put that into perspective, Visa or MasterCard, which obviously are very popular payment networks, they can process around about 30 to 40,000 transactions per second. So it's orders of magnitude higher. And if Ethereum were to become as popular as a lot of people hope it will, then it will run into a big scalability issue. And it actually did that already in the past at some points in time. And that's why these layer 2, for example, have been developed. So Ethereum is great. It allows you to do a lot of things, but it has some restrictions, and that's the reason why there is competition in the blockchain market, because some of these alternative chains are addressing some of the restrictions or shortcomings that Ethereum has today. And what we are going to do today, we are going to use the so-called Polygon blockchain, which is an Ethereum compatible chain. But Polygon is very scalable. It's one of the most scalable EVM chains that can actually process, theoretically, 65,000 transactions per second. Although the real value is probably a bit smaller. This is a theoretical value. But even despite that, Polygon is highly scalable and has a number of advantages compared to Ethereum. Plus, one more thing to consider. We are going to tokenize on what's called a testnet. So there are mainnets, and those are the chains that you really use when you create actual valuable tokens. But for testing purposes, each of these chains also has a so-called testnet, where you can test transactions for free, and if something breaks, then nothing really happens. And so that's what we're going to do today. Is everybody ready with their MetaMask wallet now? Yes. Great. And the next step that you need to do is you need to add the Polygon Mumbai testnet as a supported network in your wallet. If you're on a mobile phone, then what you need to do is you need to open the browser. The MetaMask wallet has a browser, and the icon would typically look something like this. Did everybody find the browser? Yes. Someone who did not find it. Don't be shy. Don't worry. We won't kick you out. Okay. When you are in the browser, you would need to open this URL, mumbai.polygonscan.com. If that's too long to type in, what you can also do is you can type in Mumbai Polygon, because the browser, just like a regular web browser, there's a search engine behind the address bar. They use DuckDuckGo, I believe. And so when you just type in Mumbai Polygon, then the Polygon Scan Block Explorer will come up. And once you have opened that, you scroll all the way down to the footer, and there is a small button that says Add Mumbai Network. And it's the easiest way to add the Mumbai network to your MetaMask wallet. So that's what you need to do. You need to open the browser, go to the Mumbai Polygon Scan Block Explorer, and click the button Add Mumbai Network. And then MetaMask will ask you whether you actually want to do that. And yes, you want to do that, so please click Approve.
And then the second step is, do you want to switch network, and you also want to do that, because that's the network.
Yes, because that's the network that we want to use. Network in this context, by the way, is just another term for blockchain.
What about on the laptop? Is it the same?
Yes, so you can also go to the same URL. You can go to the same URL in your regular web browser. And then you also scroll to the footer. So it's the same process. There you just use your regular browser, because there is no MetaMask browser on desktop. And Henry, could you bring me a bottle of water, please?
Henri?
It's only a test network. It doesn't support like a production, it's only a test network.
Well, you can switch to the Polygon mainnet if you want.
Yeah, okay.
So, and MetaMask supports all EVM, so all Ethereum compatible chains, but just for the purpose of the workshop, we wanted to use the test network. Someone who doesn't have the Polygon Mumbai testnet added yet. Someone still working on it, or is everybody done? Don't be shy. We have enough time. Okay. I assume we can continue. Okay, so let's assume everybody has that added. If you don't, we will discover that in the next steps. Now, we need to send you money, testnet money. Because when you create a token, you will need to deploy a smart contract. Now, in order to do that, you need to pay something that's called gas fees. Gas fees have several functions on a blockchain. One of the main functions is to prevent the blockchain from being flooded with spam transactions. Because if the transactions were completely free, then some stupid people would DDoS the heck out of the blockchains, and so that this doesn't happen, it costs money to transact on a blockchain, so you need to pay, and you pay typically with the native cryptocurrency of a blockchain. On the Polygon blockchain, the native cryptocurrency is called a MATIC token. And on the Polygon Mumbai testnet is also called MATIC. And so that you can create a token later on in the session today, you need to have some MATIC tokens in your wallet. Now, there's different ways to obtain testnet tokens for free. The easiest way is that we send them to you. So what we want you to do now as a next step is to go to your browser, make sure that you are on the Mumbai testnet. Sorry, not the browser, the wallet. Go to your Metamask wallet, make sure that you're on the Mumbai testnet and copy your address. There's a copy button here, so you literally have to tap this, and then, and I hope everybody is familiar with email, just paste it in an email and send it to service@bitbond.com. And the gentleman in the back, Sahar, he will send you money if you do that.
If you're using the app, it works a bit differently. You want to use that wallet button on the bottom left. That will get you to the main page with your account. And there it says address and a little copy sign. So you want to click that to copy your address.
Okay, so that's a very good hint from Felix. So this screenshot is from the desktop Metamask wallet. It looks slightly different in mobile. So if you don't know where to find the address, then ask Felix and he will describe it again.
For me, it's Mumbai, not Mumbai testnet.
Okay, that's fine. Mumbai is also fine. Then you're definitely on the right one. There is just one Mumbai network. Sometimes the testnet might be there, sometimes it might not be there. Did everybody find their address?
I have 4 addresses.
Okay, so I has 4 addresses, so you just came. If you want to participate, I can walk you through the steps really quickly. Hello? Yeah. Do you want to participate? Should I walk you through the steps that you missed?
I use Metamask.
You use Metamask. Okay.
Yeah. So
then just email your address. Well, check if you have Mumbai testnet added to your Metamask. And please email your address to service@bitbond.com, and we will send you some testnet points. So I'm counting 13 people, so if everybody participates, I should have 13 addresses.
It's a general problem.
checklist for talking.
Just send all
Or maybe you can already have one batch, so I have, and then I'll do a second one.
I have 8 addresses.
Yeah, then, yeah.
He's trying to save on gas
The good thing is we're doing free money with testnet points, so there's things that are called faucets, where you can actually go online, paste in your address, and it will send you testnet tokens. But sometimes they're actually quite complicated, so we thought it's easier when we just sent you the testnet tokens. But fun fact, so there's plenty of these testnets, and one other popular testnet is the so-called Gurley testnet on Ethereum, and it's so hard to actually get testnet coin that some people actually start to sell them for real money. And in the early days of Bitcoin, like back in 2012 and 13, there were also times when, so Bitcoin also has a testnet, and there were times when the Bitcoin testnet coins were also so scarce that some people started to actually sell them. Yeah. Well, that should
understand that others should have received.
Yep, I have it.
So as a next step, you should check your balance. I think, I don't know if Sa has sent this amount, but 0.05 MATIC should be your balance now. You said 0.1, and even better, so you should. Sa was very generous and sent you more money than
Yeah. Metamask is just insisting that I have to save the password.
Okay. Yeah. That is actually a good point. We elegantly ignored that.
Yeah.
Metamask is very aware of security, and they want you really badly to back up your passphrase. Yeah. So going forward, if you really want to use your MetaMask wallet on mainnet, which by the way is something that you definitely should do, back up your passphrase in a secure way.
So do you mind to read the address? To send
Just it's service@bitbond.com. This one, service@bitbond.com.
An online. What's the best way to protect your password?
Oh, that is well, we could do another satellite event just on that topic. There's actually very nice physical devices where you can put in the words into like a metal case. But then when you lose that, it's so what I typically use, I might not have to say this, but I actually use a password manager. Yeah, so that's some people simply print it out. So some people even create the wallet on a computer that is not connected to the internet, so that there is no risk of someone taking it. Then you create the wallet, you print out, but also from a print, you need a relatively old school setup.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, or you use something that's called a multi-signature wallet, where you are not the only person who can actually spend funds from that wallet, but you will introduce it to Patricia or your grandma or your sister or whoever. And then whenever you want to transact, at least one other person will need to approve the transaction together with you. That's actually what banks are doing. Of course, then it's not just two people, but there is a relatively complex, it's called a governance mechanism on the wallet. Yeah, but for like, a consumer wallet, the safest thing to do is either you have a very secure setup with a password manager, or you literally print it, but you don't print it just once, but you print it maybe 2 or 3 times and keep it in different physical locations.
Okay.
How do you set up a multi-sig?
So MetaMask is not a multi-sig wallet. With MetaMask, you cannot do that. You would need a different type of wallet. Credo is, for example, a consumer-oriented wallet, which is relatively easy to use, but which has multi-sig capabilities. No, it's simply a different wallet. They have nothing to do with each other. It's simply a different type of wallet.
Yeah, but is there no way to protect it from the other MetaMask with multi-sig?
Well, in theory, I'm not an expert on that, but in theory, you maybe can do that because you can connect a hardware ledger wallet to MetaMask and just use MetaMask as the software interface, and then maybe you can set up multi-sig, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
As far as I know, you could set up MetaMask in a multi-sig signature way. But what you can do is other solutions like Gnosis Safe, for example, which is like an open free multi-sig solution that exists on the market.
Good point.
Gnosis Safe. And there you can easily just attach 2 different MetaMask accounts, for example, and then use those 2 accounts as the 2 parties for the multi-signature wallet.
So you can be one of different people.
Exactly, or you with one person with multiple accounts, but yeah.
And some people even use one multi-sig and then have 2 local wallets that they don't share with somebody else. It's just that you need 2 pieces to the puzzle, and then they can go to different spots. So the more money you have on chain, the more protected you want to be.
Yeah.
And that's how you can do that.
And typically, you always have a trade-off between security and convenience. That's the everlasting, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So, how many addresses did you receive in total?
11.
11. So we have 2 people who have not sent their addresses. Are you fine with that, or are you count as 1? Okay, perfect. Then I would say let's continue, and everybody should have 0.1 MATIC in their wallet. So now we come to the token creation part. What we want you to do now is to use what we call token tool. If you are on desktop, then please open your regular browser, Chrome or whatever you use, and go to tokentool.bitbond.com. Once you've done that, click the Connect Wallet button up here. This modal will open, and then you log in with your Metamask wallet. If you're on mobile, which obviously a lot of people are, you can do something very similar. However, here it's important not to open your regular mobile browser, but again you go into Metamask, and you have to open the Metamask browser, which is this icon right here. I don't know whether this is Android or iPhone and whether it looks different on these 2 OSs, but anyway, you have to open the Metamask browser, and then there's also a URL field, and in the URL field again you type in tokentool.bitbond.com. And then Token Tool will open, and you will have the same Connect Wallet button as you would have on desktop, and then you click the Connect Wallet button and confirm that you want to connect.
Nice graphic.
Thank you. It was redesigned about 3 months ago, and it looked really ugly before that. We found a capable designer who did that for us.
Yeah, but we don't have it like
And pressing the connect button might be your first interaction with the smart contracts.
And what you're doing right now, this is web3 by the way. So Token Tool doesn't have a username password login intentionally. You are logging in with your address. Your username is essentially the address that you have in your wallet. And this is super convenient because before Web3, we either were using username password, which I think everybody hates, or we were using centralized services from Google or Microsoft or whatever. But probably login with Google, I would suspect, is the most popular login method. But then, of course, Google has all your data. And I'm not like a super critical person of that. I use login with Google all the time because it's extremely convenient. But this method is far less intrusive and is protecting your privacy much better. And it's also much more convenient in my view, because you only back up your passphrase once, and now every website that has a wallet login allows you to log in, and you don't need usernames and passwords at all anymore. So I think just as a byproduct, it's solving a big problem in the internet in general.
Can you briefly explain, like really briefly, because it was probably complicated, how it works in the background, like how you validate that this is a person logging in? So the login is this is a very good question. The login it would be relatively easy to pretend you have the address. Yes. However, once you have to do meaningful interactions with a Web3 app, or also these are also called decentralized applications, then you need to sign with your private key, and that's kind of the equivalent to the password. Yeah. So the moment you are interacting and transacting with a Web3 app, it will ask you to sign, and it doesn't have to mean that you are sending coins somewhere, but it's a signature from within the wallet, and that proves that you own the private key to that address. And with that, you can prove that you are the legitimate owner of that address. Did everybody successfully log in, or does someone have questions or problems? Great, so let's assume, so this is a big step. You now made
potentially your first Web3 login. Now we want to go ahead and create the token, the core part. As I mentioned, there are so-called fungible and non-fungible tokens. And they follow certain token standards. Fungible tokens typically ERC20 and variations of that, and non-fungible typically ERC721 and variations of that. Non-fungible tokens, not always but often, will have a creative attached to them, like an image, like a JPEG, a PNG, a video, a GIF, whatever. Today we will be creating a fungible token because it's a little bit simpler to do. So if you want, feel free to create NFTs as well, because Token Pool also allows you to create NFTs. But for the purpose of the workshop right now, we are going to create a fungible token simply because the process is simple and we wanted to make sure that you get out of here before midnight. So let's go ahead and create an ERC20 token. In order to do that, before we do that, actually still one or two more comments on the theory. So there's a lot of configuration options for ERC20 tokens. We will not need all of them, but some of them are necessary and required. Every token, for example, has a name. So you can think of any name that you want. It's, you can put in numbers, you can put in letters, whatever. So you could say like TOA Satellite Event 2023, whatever. Every token also must have a symbol. The symbol can be the exact same thing as the name.
Maybe for you who can't read it in the back, to make this easier to follow. If you're already connected to Token Pool, click Create Token, and you'll have the form of all the inputs that goes on Token.
Exactly. You will see.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can go to Create Token and you will see all of this.
And you will see that you're connected with Mumbai. That's the first thing. You scroll a bit further, and then you have all the inputs that are going on.
Very good. Then one other thing that you need is the number of tokens that you want to create. You can just create, you can even create 0 if you want, and then create more tokens later on. You can start with 1, you can start with 10, you can start with 1 million. I would recommend to be generous and do at least like 100 tokens. So that's something that you can do. Then number of decimals. So when you want to create stablecoins, there are also certain, let's say, standards. Most popular stablecoins typically have 6 decimals. Utility tokens typically have 18 decimals. That's the maximum that the ERC20 standard allows. But you're free to choose whichever number you want.
What stands behind the decimal? Like, what is the... Just like...
It's simply a convention of the type of asset. So most of the time, people would simply add 18 decimals, which is the maximum that's possible. Only in some certain types of tokens, it's more common to do less decimals.
It just defines how divisible the token is. So
Yeah,
if you put it to 0,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have like 1 coin, you can divide it by 100 something.
We can actually discuss this based on this, because here we are making actually a recommendation. And the gray ones we are recommending to ignore for this purpose, so I'm not also discussing what they do, because it would take a little bit too long. What we do recommend is that you activate the burning of tokens and the minting of tokens. Why is that? Because that allows you to increase and decrease the supply after the token has been created. We also recommend to activate pausing of tokens. If your token can be paused, it means that you as the token creator can pause it, and then nobody who holds the token will be able to move it. So it gives you actually quite some power as the token creator. The use case behind that is when there are some network issues or there are some technical issues on your side as the token issuer, then you want to be able to prevent any movement of the token. We will be ignoring some of these because it will take too long to explain them. What we also recommend to activate is the blacklisting of addresses. So if someone holds the token who should not be holding it, then you can freeze the token in their wallet. And that's what blacklisting allows you to do.
That's cool.
And one thing that's also quite nice, you don't have to, but which we recommend to do is to activate what is called the asset documentation. You can put in another string of characters in there, like a website, for example, that the token is referencing, or you can even put in a message in there. You can link to a certain document.
12 million. Wait.
So, did everybody manage to open, create token, and start typing in your configuration?
Yeah, that's like.
But so far we haven't chosen between ERC20 or ERC7.
So, when you go to create token, it's automatically an ERC20.
I'm using a symbol from the TC.
Well, one recommendation that I would have, the symbol is typically, hello, this is quite important. The symbol is typically how the token is represented in your wallet. So choose something short.
Ticker.
Think of stock tickers, yeah.
Can we add emojis?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can add emojis, yes. Some people actually do that, yeah.
But it's hard to search for it.
Yeah, it is. But this is a fun token, so you are allowed to use emojis if you want to do it.
And the document placeholder can change later on?
Yes, that is one of the settings that you can change. The name and the symbol, for example, you cannot change later, but the document you can change it later on.
So, good question. Essentially, is this how like a whole bunch of meme coins are created, like through?
Yes, exactly. That's one of the, because it has become so simple to create a token, that's one of the reasons why there has been such a spike of these meme coins.
And have any famous meme coins been created using Bitbond?
Well, we don't even know because it's a web3 and we don't track each and every token that's being created because there's plenty of tokens being created every day, so we would need to track all of them. And we would only know it if they got in touch with us and maybe went through our customer support, and that's how we may have noticed it. Like the LimeWire example, for example, they created their token with this. The main reason we know it is because they talked to us and they had a couple of questions, and we guided them through the process.
Okay.
But otherwise,
but in the recent meme coin hype, we definitely saw like a big spike in the traffic.
Yeah.
This option can be false transferred.
So if you are happy.
What should you say yes and no to? What option?
Force transfer is functionality that does not come with the normal ERC20 standard, but with the security token standard. And this is used for more central parties, for example, if a bank wants to, a bank, for example, to issue a workload that they can initiate a transfer from your wallet, from other person's wallet.
You can change some of them, not all.
CBDC.
But you can also create a second one if you want.
You have enough funds to create 100.
Is it really bad now?
Sorry?
Is it bad? But I didn't select
No, it's good. It's fine.
But I think it's over.
And if you're not happy with it, you can also create another one. Because Sahar was so generous to send you so much MATIC that you can pay a lot of gas fees, so you can create a lot of other tokens.
Who do I send the token address to?
We will get there. We will get there. Is everybody happy with their configuration? Or are there further questions? Because if you're happy with your configuration, you can go ahead and scroll down and click the Create Token button. When you do that, MetaMask will ask you to confirm that because you have to pay gas fees. So MetaMask is informing you that you are doing this right now. And what it's doing in the background, it's signing this transaction with the private key that's in your wallet, and it's deploying a new smart contract to the Polygon testnet. And once you have confirmed that, you will see this success message after a while. It takes a few seconds. It can even be a minute sometimes. So be patient and wait for the success screen. Once you see that, click Add to MetaMask, because then this token will also be displayed in the list of assets that you own.
if you are finished with your configuration, just be aware that smart contracts are usually like immutable. It means that a lot of the functionalities cannot be changed after they are deployed on blockchain.
So the name, for example, is one of the things that cannot be changed. So just saying.
Yeah.
What is the additional cost if becomes non-fungible?
So the configurations, you actually have fewer configuration options on the non-fungible standard, but the process is very similar in general. You also need to determine a name, a symbol. You typically add a creative, like an image, for example, right? So that's something that comes on top. But other than that, the process is very similar. And if you want, you can also go ahead and do that. There is, when you scroll down in the token tool on the left-hand navigation bar, you will see that there's a Create NFT tab. So if you want, you can simply go there and create an NFT.
So we do one slide back just to check if this.
Okay, that's all. Yeah, we're boring. It's not going to be too long.
But I did not say what is the process to be.
We will come to that. We will actually show you that.
But it's good that you activated these features.
What's the reason how activating how secret token?
So what it allows you to do is when you pause the token, nobody will be able to send it anywhere. You will not be able to.
It's becoming
So sometimes it's useful when you have an issue with the token or you want to reconcile transactions and you need to pause, further movement of the token.
Okay.